Welcome to Tyrompers No Limit Podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, thanks so much for joining Tyrompers No Limit Podcast. This episode number 59. Boys and girls, we are fired up today. We got a man that's a doctorate of physical therapy. He's going to drop a lot of knowledge bombs on us today. This is a man whose mission is to keep people moving so they can live optimal and healthy lives. One of my favorite follows on Twitter. I absolutely love this man, Mr. Brian Whittington. Welcome to the podcast, sir. How you doing today?
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. You know, before we started, I was taking a quick look at the podcast list, and you have had some legends on the podcast. So I appreciate being here. I'm just a guy. You've had some, ultimate people on here. So I appreciate you having me.
Dude, we're all just guys, man. That's people like hop on calls with me. They'll be like, oh man, I feel like I'm talking to this guy I've been following for years. He's got 90,000 followers. I'm like, bro, I'm just a dad who likes this. I'd probably change two poop diapers. I changed
That's
two
right.
diapers before I hopped on here.
Yeah. Yeah. In the morning, you put your pants on one leg at a time.
That's right, man. But I appreciate all you share. I think you have some great common sense takes and you can help people with a lot of this stuff. So maybe for anybody who doesn't quite know you yet, I'm going to drop all Brian's, credentials and everything and his Twitter underneath this. Give him a follow and check him out. But maybe you can give a quick intro of yourself, who you are, what you're about.
Yeah. Let me give you a little background about myself. So my 9 to 5 is I'm a physical therapist. I see outpatient physical therapy, and that's pretty much kind of the classic physical therapy you think. It's not the hospital. It's not in someone's house. We have a clinic. You kind of come to the clinic. So you're mobile, healthy enough to kind of get around the community. But we see everything from knee replacements, hip replacements, back pain, knee pain, athletic population, older population, kind of, if there's a diagnosis out there, I've seen it. So I've been a PT for about 15 years, treating in that space the whole time. Just a little bit to maybe kind of how I got to this specific point in my life. Maybe before I do that, though, the most important thing is that I have a beautiful wife of 16 years. She's my high school sweetheart. We've got 3 kids that keep us busy and active. Basketball practice last night. We just finished up soccer, swim lessons, you got all that good stuff. So family man first, and then, PT is my occupation. But one of the ways I kind of got maybe to my kind of current point was, like I said, I've been a PT for about 15 years. So I've been long enough where I still got plenty of time in front of me in my career, but I've been around long enough where I've been able to see things. I kind of been able to see some cycles. And so I'm treating patients over the years, and I start to see, I'm seeing patients back, 2 years later for this injury and 2 years later for that injury. And as I'm spending time in healthcare, I'm starting to realize, we're missing something here. I'm seeing people over and over for just kind of chronic issues. We might be able to fix what they got going on right now, but how are we doing long term? How is this patient actually getting better over the last, 10 years? If I've seen them 5 times every other year, like I might have helped them with those individual things, but like, have I really helped them? They're still not kind of back to their full abilities. And so I was really seeing, and kind of over the years, seeing this trend that a lot of things that I saw for people that were injury wise, or maybe just chronic pain kind of issues, came down to health. There was poor health that was going on, and that was contributing to their whatever it was, chronic knee pain, chronic back pain, not being able to kind of exercise anymore. And so I'm kind of sitting in this space myself where I'm going, look, something's just not right in our system. We're a reactive care. We're not a proactive care. I wasn't seeing any real health in healthcare. And so I'm kind of noticing this myself. And are you familiar with Eric Larson? He wrote a book called Devil in the White City, was kind of his real big book. But in that book, he kind of has this way of writing where one chapter is one story, the next chapter is a different story. And in the beginning, these stories seem completely separate. But as the book kind of goes along, they're coming together. And so that's kind of how I see like kind of my story. I've got this, I'm viewing the healthcare system and I'm seeing like, yeah, man, there's some issues. And then on my own personal self, I'm going through, life, and I'm that typical guy. Played sports growing up. I went to college, super active. You get a career, you get married, you start being a little less active. And, I'm going through the gamut of, man, I just don't feel really well. I don't have a lot of energy. Oh, my stomach is bothering me. And I always had the excuses. Well, we just had a baby. Well, I just started a new clinic. Well, I should be tired. I've got this going on. I've taken on more work, more responsibility. And I start to go down the, like, all right, I'm seeing this doctor and I feel like we're throwing darts at a board trying to figure out what's going on. And so one day I'm helping a patient, and he's got back pain, and I'm struggling with back pain at the same time. And I'm grabbing a piece of equipment for him, and I walk over and I hand him this piece of equipment. We kind of fumble it and it falls to the ground, and he looks at it and he goes, I can't pick that up. And I look at it and I go, I can't pick that up. And to be honest, it was one of the most embarrassing moments I had professionally. I just remember thinking.
And how old were you at that time, Brian?
I was probably, that was probably in 2018, okay. I would say. So I had been practicing about 10 years, so maybe about 5 years ago. And I remember thinking, man, I see this problem with the system, and guess who's the problem? Me. I'm identifying this problem in patients, but I'm no better. I'm not eating well. I'm not healthy. I'm not practicing what I preach. And so that for me was a turning point to say, this is embarrassing. I'm embarrassed of myself as a healthcare professional to not be engaging in what I know I should be engaging in. And I said, I'm never going to be in that position again. I'm never going to be in a position where I'm unable to help someone because I'm not doing what I need to do for myself. And so for me, that was a turning point of saying, hey, okay, I want to get into practicing more what I preach. I mean, I knew what to do. I just wasn't doing it. Again, making all the excuses that were, they're excuses. There's some validity to those excuses, but they're still, okay, so what are you going to do? Even though that's true, you got a new kid. What are you going to do? How are you going to get over it? So I started that journey. And then as we hit the COVID time. COVID was such a crazy period and crazy time. And
probably in healthcare, right? It's got to be just
definitely crazy in healthcare. But for me, what was the kind of the big trigger point is, I know it's kind of people have strong opinions on COVID and whatever you ask them. But the one thing that I didn't hear, and the one thing that should not be controversial at all, is that your health determined how well you were going to do with COVID. And so it was at that point where I felt like, hey, I'm not hearing a voice in any area that's addressing, like, look, argue all you want about this, that, and the other, but we can't argue about being healthier. We can't argue about the benefits of exercise. We can't argue about eating whole nutritious food and getting all this processed stuff out of there. And so that's for me to the point where I said, you know what, I'm not anybody special, but I'm not hearing a voice. And so I'll kind of step into the ring and try to start being a voice into it. And that's kind of brought me kind of to today.
I love that, man. And I think that's a whole, I go a million different directions with this. And I want to put up your picture here. Shout out to Alex, our awesome editor. He's the one that introduced us actually, but that's your picture. I think you were 23 in that first picture, and that's today at 40, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's just an amazing transformation, and just goes to show, like, again, most people know the right things to do. I knew the right things to do when I was, up until 34, same as you. Like, I played high school sports and some active in college, and I had a kid, got an office job, just got lazy. Right. And
yeah,
we're approaching 2/3 obesity or overweight in the States, and nobody wanted to talk about that when COVID hit. Right. And I'm the most optimistic person in the world, I feel like. And I remember actually saying to my wife, this is going to be it's going to be a hard time for our nation and our world, but I think it's going to be the best thing, because we're going to come out of this as a nation that's dedicated to health. Companies are now going to say, hey, let's get out and take walks at lunch. Let's not just talk about have some health committee that comes in and tells you to chew gum when you're stressed, right? Like, but actually, like, is helpful in a lot of these areas. And unfortunately, it went the other way. And I'm still kind of confused by that. I'd love your take on that as to why it did. It became controversial. And I get everybody did have these strong opinions, right? But the one thing that should have been just across the board that every leader should have been practicing and saying is you have 100x likelihood of just getting over this thing and recovering if you'll just take a daily walk, if you'll hit the gym 3 times a week, if you'll eat real foods, if you'll drink water, if you'll, and instead we closed the gyms and we kept McDonald's open, and everybody went the other way. And I would love your take as to why that happened. And then, I guess how you kind of came out of that as a voice and what your hopes to do are in the future with that.
Yeah. I think the answer to that I can use an example of something kind of adjacent to that. I think that I was recently spent some time, and I think actually what you were mentioning, one of Alex Hart's kind of connection with us was this tweet that I had. He mentioned your Tweet Around the World, which is an awesome podcast there. But I had to spend some time in a hospital with a family member I was visiting, and I had to go to their cafeteria, for a couple of meals. And I mean, the food that was served in the cafeteria was atrocious in nutrition. I had to search hard for just a tuna sandwich and a water. I mean, there was nachos with processed cheese and pizza day and fries. And so that's going on in a hospital cafeteria. And so I think the problem is that if you ask any healthcare professional, is good nutrition important? Should we be, exercising? They're all going to say yes. But that little example that we're not eating well in a hospital shows that truly deep down, we don't really believe it makes that much of a difference. Yeah, that's a good thing you should be doing. And, maybe in a second tier thing, the real issue that you need to do is, this medical whatever procedure, or I don't think we really believe that health would make that much of a difference, or can that really move the needle? And for me, I see it as, man, we can move the needle with our country's health with diet and exercise. Physical activity can move the needle significantly. It should be our first approach to treatment. Kind of in the medical field too, one thing we'll say is, you could fix something with maybe 3 different treatments, but what is the least amount of treatment needed to produce the effect we need to we want to produce? And so, man, exercise is the least amount of intervention that we can give somebody that produces this huge effect. And so I think the reason COVID kind of got a little crazy is I don't think we really believed that exercise was as powerful and useful as we maybe say we do, because when it was in practice, it just didn't happen. And so that's my goal. My goal and kind of a voice is just to say, man, the power of exercise, the power of movement can change a lot of stuff in your health. When it comes to physical therapy, a lot of people will ask, what do you do in physical therapy? And there's all these like fancy, we restore impairments and we return patients to optimal functional levels. I mean, the older I get, I'm like, forget all that fancy word. What we do is we help people move. That at the end of the day, we just need to help people keep moving. Because when you're not moving, that's when things go bad.
Yeah, I saw that definitely so a couple points there. My grandmother, who, I love, I grew up a couple blocks from my whole life. And, she passed 5 years ago, but, when my dad and my mom are really big, they're marathon runners and they're big into lifting and biking and being active. There's going to be 66 here coming up, and they were just out here a week ago, man. And they're, my dad's throwing my 30 pound son around. He played 3 hours of pickleball with us, like they're really big into movement. And I remember them saying that to my grandma. You either move or you either do it or you lose it. You got to get up every day. I know it's not comfortable, but you need to just keep walking. And I saw that with her. She kind of deteriorated, right? And so you probably see that with a lot of older patients, but I think what's more concerning now is we're seeing with children, man. I mean, childhood obesity. I'm sure you're seeing kids come in with these problems that probably just weren't problems. I mean, even if you look back 2 generations ago at like class pictures, right? there was maybe a chubby kid who just had bad genes and not a great home life, but now it's like over half the kids are not healthy looking, and it's almost become taboo to say that. And so I think as a country and as a society, we need to look at, well, what are the causes of that? Like you said, what are we doing now that we weren't doing back then? What's in our food now? Why are we just glued to screens all day? Why aren't we getting out and moving? If you're listening to this podcast on YouTube, man, go take a walk and listen to it, get up and move. Like it just, I don't know. What do you think then are the realistic solutions to this? Because I don't really hear a lot of leaders, any that I can think of, really preaching this stuff,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think some of the realistic solutions are, when you kind of get broad scale, I've lived in a few different cities throughout my adult life. There are cities who the construction of the city makes it more accessible to be active. And so, I've even read some stuff that says, hey, even as when we're developing cities, let's be thinking about some of these things. How do we create our kind of pathways and streets and buildings and all that to kind of promote health? A lot of times you can't go for a walk or run because we're surrounded by this busy street that comes this way, and you don't want to run across, 4 lanes of a road. And so on a high level, like we could just be thinking about these things as we're developing new areas. But really, I think it's got to be to really move the needle in kind of the individual families. It's got to be a priority. And I don't think it's quite as hard as people make it seem. I've heard you mention this. One of the big things for our families is we just take walks. Yeah. It's kind of a chance to get outside, get some fresh air, go for a walk. It's a chance to kind of talk to the kids a little bit, ask how their day's been going. Hey, how's that class been going? How's that situation we were talking about? It's the family dinner moment, but it's moving. So daily walks, or, we just kind of traditionally in the summer, we'll take one after dinner. We'll go out. We kind of try to do one Sunday afternoons for a family walk. So just and make that a daily habit. So for me, that really wasn't something like I did growing up. But what my wife and I have talked about is we want that to be normal for our kids, so that when they're adults, that's just, going for walks is just kind of what we do. It's normal. So we have to kind of normalize some of that activity.
That's a great point. I think you mentioned, as parents, we get to kind of set the tone for what's normal. We had a family come visit us. This is like 6 months ago, but we don't have TV here, man. We don't have Netflix or Hulu. We haven't had it in 3 years. And so it was like a family of 5 kids, and they came in and they're like, well, what do you guys do? And we're like, well, we swim, we walk, we hike, we ride bikes, we go to parks. We have relay races, scavenger hunts, all these things. Right. And my kids don't even think about, like, should we just sit in front of screens all day, right? And not that we don't throw on YouTube or a Blippy. We got 2-2-year-old, every now and then, right? But like daily, we are moving, right? I was 5 minutes late to this podcast. Thanks for waiting, because, the kids were at a playland all day, just running for 2.5 hours, and that's what we do every morning. It was a little cold and windy today, but if not, we're at a park every day. And my kids are just going to know that playing outside is normal. That's what we do. And like you said, we take walks every night as a family. That's just normal. That's what we do. And I think, you can blame society, I guess, or you can blame the government. And I'm pretty bad about some of these things. Sometimes this is eye-opening that I need to get better at, where I say, well, I wish they would do that. And well, ultimately everything comes back to us, right? There's really not an incentive, if you look at it, for hospitals or some of these people to really fix people. They kind of want patients, right? And so you have to take ownership of your own life and your own family and say, hey, you know what? We know that this is good for us, and this is what we're going to do.
See myself getting glared by the sun here. Yeah, I 100% agree. And, some of it too, I think is, even when I was in the realm of like, I'm just not feeling very well. And then, you kind of just make some changes. You don't even realize how bad you were feeling until you make those changes. And so for a lot of people, I think, you got to convince someone they're sick before they need the treatment. And a lot of people are like, oh, yeah, I don't know, I'm doing pretty well. I'm pretty healthy 40-year-old. And you're like, well, maybe not. Like, you kind of got to convince them first. Like, there's actually a different way to feel.
Mm.
And
Yeah,
so,
nobody takes it serious until they have the heart attack or they have the
yeah,
scare, it seems like, right? And the big thing is it's like, man, that hit home where I remember kind of, going to the office. I remember joking that I would chug 2 full Starbucks every day just to get through the day. I didn't have energy. Well, all I needed to do was tweak my diet a little bit, hit the gym in the morning, take a walk at lunch instead of
yeah,
being glued to my phone and eating processed food. And I don't need any coffee. I had a couple shots of coffee in the morning. Now I'm good, And so it's
yeah.
just being mindful of all those little decisions that kind of, dictate where our lives go really and how our bodies feel. But I guess it is hard to convince people of that when they, yeah, I'm fine. It's that generic answer. You ask somebody how they're doing, good.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
always
Yeah.
going to get that.
Yeah. And I do think one of the things that I kind of just live by is I don't have things in the home. Like my my downfall is McDonald's Coke. Man, I was like, back in the day, I would have my 3 different McDonald's within town that I'd drive past 2 McDonald's, go to the one specific one that I thought was, had the better Coke. So everyone's got our vices, but what I don't have, I don't have soda in the house. I don't have, we try not to have junk food in the house. We try not to, that stuff that you're going to then be eating every day. That's where it gets you. We're my daughter, we have something to celebrate with her, so we're going to go get ice cream this weekend. Like, it's not that we don't have that stuff, but they're treats, they're special occasion things. They're not every day. Like you were mentioned with the TV. Yeah, we'll watch a little something here and there, but if you can make things that are not every day, that's where I think we get into trouble with a lot of stuff.
I think that's big too, controlling your environment, right? Because it's like, man, if we keep bad food in the house, dude, I don't have great willpower. People ask me, how do you have willpower, Ty? I'm like, I don't, like I heard it once said best by my friend Mike, who is like, look, if you can just win 1 hour a week at the grocery store, then you don't have to worry about winning the other 187 hours or 185 hours for the week. Like, it's more, if you can just win that hour at the grocery store and keep healthy food, you're very unlikely at night when you're craving that bad food to drive 15 minutes to go get it. You're going to find a healthier option. I think that really hit home for me is you got to make these lifestyle changes and keep the healthy options around.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. I like that, that little saying.
Yeah, that was pretty huge. Well, I wanted to kind of go to this too. That this is a topic that I really have been drawn to about you, and you've kind of touched on it a little bit here, but dads especially and moms, we have a lot of moms and dads that watch this podcast. And I think it can be intimidating for them to just say, man, I'm looking at these guys who are shredded or who have 10 packs and I can never get that, and what I really like about your message is it's not kind of against them, or you don't need to squat 500. You don't need to deadlift 1,000. You see some of these guys on Twitter and it's like, if you ain't at the gym 6 hours a day for, and it's like, man, that's not real life for most of us, right? Like I'm going to the gym 4 or 5 times a week for 50 minutes. I'm taking walks every day. I'm making 80-20 healthy food choices. And I think everybody should strive to make those little changes. So can you talk about that a little bit and how a more balanced approach is usually better?
Yeah. 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 Well, I think you're 100% right too. We kind of have this idea that it's, this huge hurdle that we've got to get over for it. And so one of that's why I kind of intentionally put the phrase, I keep people moving, because I think a lot of people hear, I keep people going to the gym, and that's not what we're saying. And that's not everybody's jam. And I totally get that. I personally like going to the gym. I like the barbell. I like the weights, but that is not everybody's thing. So I'm always telling people you need to keep moving, and movement is a lot of different scenarios that you can do. That's the walks we were talking about. It's a dance maybe that you like doing, taking a ballroom class. It's, kayaking. I like to paddleboard too. So doing some paddleboarding. My wife likes to run, whatever your kind of activity that you end up enjoy doing, that's the goal. The goal is to get you just moving. So one of them is, don't have a wrong expectation. Don't have the expectation that what you have to do is you got to go to the gym. What you need to do is move. and that can look a lot of different ways. The second one is, I do think that resistance training is very important just for general health. But I try to intentionally use the phrase resistance training over lifting, because I think lifting has, those connotations. And again, I like lifting, but not everybody does. Again, resistance training looks very different. It could be body weight exercise. It could be using your TRX in your garage on your door. It could be some plyometric stuff. It could be some resistance bands, maybe some light weights. But you need some resistance for your body to kind of stimulate, muscle growth, muscle health, activity. And so I think it's just framing for the mom and dads, framing the right context of what health actually looks like. And it's not always going to the gym. It looks very different for a lot of different people. And it's about 150 minutes of moderate activity. So I think, I don't know if I'll get this quite.
150 in a week? Is that
in a week? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I might get this wrong. I can't do the math quickly in my head, but I think it's somewhere around 3%. 3% of your week, of your kind of hours. So it's not looking for a huge, commitment, 6 days a week, 6 to 8 hours a day. I mean, you're looking at 150 minutes, a couple of, broken up 30 minutes, 45 minutes, whatever. If you like, it's 70 minutes of intense physical activity. So moderate physical activity is where, if you go out for a walk, you shouldn't be able to chat like you and I are doing. You might be able to talk, but you're taking some breaths. It's like, oh, hold on a second. You want to get a little bit of intensity in there, but yeah, I don't think it's as large of a barrier as most people think.
Yeah, I think I can even attest to that. I think the best shape I was ever in actually was COVID, when they shut down our gyms. And, as a busy dad, and I was really, prioritizing health, I was just getting up and hitting my garage for about 20 to 25 minutes. I didn't even have really any equipment, man. I was doing pull-ups, push-ups, dips, high knees, some plyometric stuff. I was walking every day at lunch and walking every night, and then really mindful of what I was eating. And I was doing that 4 or 5 times a week. That was it. I think there is this barrier of like this picture of, we all got to be Arnold Schwarzenegger. We all got to be Brad Pitt from Fight Club with a 16 pack. And you really don't, man. I think, when I first started back, I remember actually driving to the gym several times. And I even looked inside and turned around and went home because I was intimidated. It was very intimidating, that barrier. But I love the way you put it, is just find activities you love and do those activities, right? Like, I meet buddies every week, and we play pickleball, tennis, we throw frisbee around, we play a game of football where I chuck it to you and then I take off running. Then he throws it to me, then and we'll do that for 20 minutes. We're out of breath. We're like, dude, we just burned 400 calories, but we just hanging with a buddy, having fun. We enjoy it,
Throwing the ball.
Those activities that you like, is movement is medicine, right? And I think it's a great way to put it.
Yeah. And one thing that was encouraging for me too, when you kind of get into the nerdy science of particularly strength training, strength training takes, it takes a lot of work to kind of build muscle. But one of the awesome kind of points is that it doesn't take much to maintain. It only takes a little bit of a stimulus to kind of maintain where you're at. And so, a lot of people might have this kind of obsessive, like, oh, I got to get in 6 days a week. If I'm only in there 4, I'm taking a step back. And you're not, if you're taking 6 weeks of absolutely nothing, yeah, maybe you take a little step back, but it doesn't take a lot to maintain where you're at. And so just, it takes some pressure off yourself. You can get in and you can do a couple, like Ty said, in your garage, and doing some push-ups and pull-ups and some TRX, and boom, you're good.
Yeah, that's huge, man. Can I ask just personally then, Brian, what's your kind of plan right now? What is your kind of lifting regimen look like, or how many days a week do you go, and what are you trying to do to be really healthy?
So after saying you don't have to do a lot, I do 6 days a week. Mainly though, I was just talking to somebody about this the other day. I've got kids. I have a job in which I'm talking and interacting with people every day. one of the things I love about lifting is I can put my headphones on and I get an hour to myself of just kind of me time. And so I really like that just hour to myself. So that's a part of it. So usually though, I'm kind of on currently a push pull legs split. And so I'll do that, 3 days and then 3 days of push pull legs again there. But I like that. That's kind of what I like. I like creating, a strength block and a hypertrophy block and a rest block and, that sort of stuff. So I enjoy that. That's why I do it. But if I were talking to somebody and kind of coaching with them, that's not the recommendation I would give them. If they're like, I hate being at the gym and in the bar, I'm like, cool, let's figure it out. Let's, find what you want to do.
Yeah, it's so critical, man. I think, I tried to get in shape back in my early 20s, I remember. And I'd been a high school athlete and then kind of gotten away from it, got really into poker where I was sitting all the time. And then I remember like looking at myself one day and I'm like, I need to lose some weight, but I didn't really know what I was doing. And so I just started running 6 days a week. And dude, I hated running. Like I hated it. And I didn't look forward to it. Then my knees started hurting. I just didn't know what I was doing. And if I'd had a guy like you to say, hey man, just find activities that you like, that get you moving, I think that would have been much less of a barrier. So I'm happy you're saying that. And I hope people take that to heart, especially I think, I'll be honest, man, I've ran an office now, worked in corporate for 6.5 years. And now I'm like a more stay-at-home dad with two 2-year-olds.
Yeah.
I have a big place in my heart for stay-at-home moms and dads a lot, because it's much easier to be shredded when you're at an office than when you're with these kids that are, they never turn off. Right.
Yeah.
And like, I think for the moms in that way, my wife and I, there's times where, dude, we might have a 10-minute thing while the boys are eating. And we'll just like walk laps around the house, or we'll get them to the park. And while they're playing, man, we're going up and down the stairs too, like with young kids, you always have to be on. And so you have to be creative with some of those ways, but all those little things really add up. If I'm really honest, you talk about the maintenance. I haven't really gone that hard in maybe 3 months out of the last 13. I've just been like 3, 4, 5 days a week, but not really hard. I'm kind of doing Twitter while I'm at the gym. I'm kind of, but I think the one thing I do have is a very active lifestyle, and that's very intentional to just build that in, right? Even when I'm taking client calls, I'm walking most of the time, it's nothing to get 25,000 steps in a day for me, just chasing my kids around, playing and doing things I do. And so I think, building that active lifestyle of things you enjoy is the key.
Yeah. Yeah. Because, you're also like, obviously we want to engage in this because we want to be healthy and not have issues down the line and, live long, active lives. But there is there's a stress relief to that exercise. There's a, dopamine hit. There's a feel good. There's a lot of just kind of added benefits of exercise as well as just engaging in things you like to do. One of my biggest pet peeves as a PT is I often hear, I'm not a runner either, but I see a lot of runners, and I'll hear people, I've been having this knee pain, and whatever healthcare professional told me I should probably give up running, but I really love it. And I'm like, why are we telling people to give up an activity they love? Like, do we really understand what we're asking of them? To give up something they enjoy doing, they find stress relief, they find pleasure, they find, whatever. It's just insane to me that we're asking that. Give me some knee pain over diabetes any day. Like I'm happy with a little bit of knee pain that I gotta mess around with. But so yeah, it's more than health. There's the mental health that that's a huge part of just being active and mobile and independent. I see a lot of patients who lose their independence. Movement is bad health wise. But as a kind of a full functioning human being, losing your independence is a really tough portion. So it's that double whammy between I can't do anything, I'm getting sicker, and also I'm dependent on people for everything. It's tough. So
why do you think they're so quick? I'm laughing to myself as you say that, because you'll find this story funny. My dad, this is about a decade ago, he had a doctor tell him he had some back issues, and they told him you need to not run anymore. And my dad was like, I don't accept that. Like I'll go to PT. He did start going to PT and started learning different ways, and even some of the foods he was eating that was causing inflammation and things like that. He really studied and got intentional, because he's like, I'm not giving up running for more of the mental benefits, to be honest, than the physical, if you ask my dad. I think he said that he wrote that doctor a letter, because this is just what my dad would do, and said, I've run around the world now 2 times since you told me to stop running, like miles wise or something. But I think that's a great point, and that there are workarounds and there are these things you can do. Because I do hear people say that a lot, like, oh, you shouldn't, well, you just need to swim. Well, he doesn't like swimming. He likes running, like, why would you tell people that,
Well, the two things with that is, one, like, well, awesome for your dad on that.
If you want to tell my dad, you just tell my dad he can't do something, right? And he'll
right. Then you'd be
one of those guys. You just tell him he can't do this.
I'd be the same way. Like, okay, all right. Well, if you're going to tell me I can't do it, but one, I think it's easy. I think it's easy to give that answer. To just go, well, I should give up that. Yeah, that problem goes away. No more back pain. Solved the problem. But what other problems have we created now? Now, feeling more depressed, adding weight, cholesterol, blood pressure isn't doing as well. Like, well, I think sometimes we're really bad at what our decisions, how is that second and third order effect of our decision? We solved 1, but we created 2 and 3. Well, that might not be the best decision then to make. And so sometimes I do think it's easy. I like you said, we might need to modify. We might need to bring down. It might not be like, oh, I'm just totally ignoring you. I'm going to do 60 miles a week still. Like, yeah, maybe we got to do 30 miles a week. Maybe we got to work on some diet. Maybe we got to work on some muscle imbalance or strength or things like that. So I don't think we say that we just ignore what's going on, but we modify. But I don't think we give up. That's the part that I go, I just don't subscribe to saying, hey, just give it up. We figure it out. That's what we do.
Probably super satisfying in your job to have these people come in pain or having these issues. And then, like, I remember my dad was nervous, maybe I just can't run anymore. And then working with a PT for 10 weeks and giving him the tools then to even go home and to, well, hey, if this flares up, I can go to this. That's got to be a really rewarding job to see people come in pain, help them really get their life back, right? Because like you said, losing that ability to run, it might not sound like a big deal for somebody like me who doesn't really like to run, but it'd be the same thing as if you told me, well, you can never lift weights again. You can never do pull-ups again. You can never, well, man, that's for my mental health. That's going to be that's a hard thing. And so you're really saving people's lives in a way to give them their life back. That's got to be very rewarding, I would think.
It definitely is a rewarding job. I enjoy it. One of the things I was worried about when I was like thinking career-wise is I just go, I don't understand how somebody does the same thing for 30 years. Like that thought just seemed insane to me. And so I do like PT where, you see the same diagnosis, but every person is different. Every presentation is different. So there's all this, little puzzle you get to work on. But one of the things that I've kind of changed later in my career now mindset, one of the things that I want to make sure I'm doing with every patient is making sure they are not fearful of movement. That's what I see so much. Like even you have a very well-intentioned, maybe family member or something. Oh, you really shouldn't be running that much because, you're going to wear out your knees or, that sort of, and I think I see a lot of people who are just scared of, am I going to make this worse? Am I not going to make this worse? Am I going to, am I going to cause myself an issue down the line? And so one of my big jobs is to make sure people are not fearful of movement. Again, we modify, we kind of talk about, well, what's a pain level that's too much? What's an okay level? But just get that fear of movement out of them. You can almost see the weight come off of them where they go, okay, well, I can do something. I just gotta, we gotta figure this out and get to it. So, and there's actually a lot of really good kind of data too, talking about how fear plays a role with chronic pain, which is one thing that I've later in my career too have started working and delving into a little bit more. But how fearful you are of movement and how that plays into your pain and your, experience of pain. And so I think for me, I'm adamant about making sure people aren't fearful of doing
I
things.
love that. I can't tell you how many times I've heard from random anonymous accounts online, you shouldn't be lifting that. You'll hurt your back. You shouldn't be, you won't. Yeah. It's like your knees will give out. It's like, yeah, I don't understand that mindset, man. That is incredible to me to hear too, that our minds are so powerful that if me and you were to sit here and have an hour discussion on how the world is terrible and going to hell in the handbasket, right? Like, I actually think I would take that same energy in you, and I'm more likely to be physically sick. I'm more like, if I dwell on those things, I believe that there's so much power in our mind, and that'd be interesting to study. But we could probably have a whole 10-hour podcast on that. Would be fun.
Yeah.
I have a couple questions that came in from people.
Yeah.
I put up a tweet today, man.
Yeah.
First one, shout out to Alex, our awesome editor. He said, hey, day-to-day clients, what do you see over and over again? And what do you think is the biggest barrier that your clients have to overcome to be really healthy?
To be honest, what we were just touching on, the biggest barrier I think is people being fearful. A lot of people are fearful, especially when you're injured, am I going to make this worse? Am I not going to make this worse? Or even when they're pain-free, well, I don't want it to happen again, so I'm not going to, go back to running or that sort of thing. And so a lot of times I think the biggest thing I do is educate patients and say, well, I don't know if it was the running that bothered you, maybe it was this, and try to kind of declaw some of that stuff. So the biggest barrier I think is fear. The most common thing I see, to be honest, is kind of hip and low back, kind of glute weakness. When it comes down just to, mechanical issues, we sit a lot as a society. And so we don't have any posterior strength, and that causes, lots of problems. And so, if you like lifting squats, Roman deadlifts, those, I like a lot of like Bulgarian squats are one of my
but I love them.
relationship. I always say that when I put that on my plan, I think, man, that's so smart. Those are so good. And then when I'm doing them, I'm like, I hate the guy who put this on my plan.
Everybody has a love-hate relationship with the Bulgarian split squats, man. Yeah, that's a good answer. I love that. Next question, man, comes from, I got to put the hat on. Shout out to Richie McPeak. I love this guy, man. Richie, he is the man. He's been a former podcast guest, and he asked a question today. He said, hey, Brian, how many days of lifting can I go in a row before I need to consider taking a rest day?
Yeah, I do think the two answers with that one. When you're doing kind of your traditional lifting, I do think you probably need 24 to 48 hours recovery, because you just don't want to get in that cycle of you're breaking down. You got to build that muscle back up. So you do got to give yourself a little bit of time. But the caveat is when it comes to rehab, I do have my patients do those every day, mainly because we're not doing weights and resistance hard enough to really break tissue down. Like hypertrophy isn't really happening, or muscle growth isn't happening. We're really getting muscle control. So I tell patients a lot of times, a lot of the exercises, don't think about the gym, think about practicing the piano. You can't just practice the piano once every 3 days. Like, you got to get 30 minutes every day, because we're trying to gain control, right? I want my fingers to go where they're supposed to. A lot of times in rehab, we're trying to gain control of muscles, get muscles firing, activated, being able to control them, maybe a sequence, get muscles firing in a certain sequence. So those are every day. So I think it's, somebody's a little bit more self-aware on their exercise. If they're thinking, well, how intense was I going? How much was I breaking that muscle down? If I'm doing that, you got to give yourself some time.
That makes sense, man. I like how you brought that up of just getting the muscles firing. It reminded me, my boys took swimming lessons. They're at less than 2 years old. And this lady told us, hey, for 6 weeks, they'll come 7 or 8 minutes a day, but it's just consistently every single day. But 7-8 minutes, and dude, by week 4 and 5, they were swimming like fish, man. And it really that sparked me of how big consistency is, and practice putting in those repetitions every single day. I like the way you said that.
My daughter actually did the same thing when we got her in swim lessons. We were deciding, we're like, hey, we really want her to be able to swim this summer. And they said, well, if that's the case, do the every single day lesson for, I think maybe you signed them up by week, 1 week, and then you could do it another time. But they're like, they'll learn to swim if you're doing it every day. If you're doing it once a week, it's going to take some time.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, man. Well, dude, Brian, I so appreciate you coming on, dropping a lot of wisdom. I look at the time and I'm like, holy cow, man. It's but I thank you so much, man. And I want to encourage everybody out here to give Brian a follow. Let's see, we got your Twitter handle. It'll be plugged down here, but anything else you'd like to plug or put out there for the people, man?
No, if you have any specific questions, want to delve into any coaching, anything like that, just shoot me a DM on there, and usually pretty active and responsive.
I love that, man. Well, I appreciate you sharing and putting out everything you do, man. I'm a huge fan of yours. I appreciate you taking the time and coming on here. I feel like I'm always made better every time I see anything of yours, man. And it's obvious why. You're a very intelligent, well-spoken guy. You know your stuff. And I appreciate you taking the time to come on, brother.
I appreciate it. Thanks, man.
Thank you. Any last words for the people, Brian?
Just keep moving.
There, you guys got it, man. So put down the podcast. Go be nice to yourself. Be kind to everybody else that you encounter today. Go get a walk in, get a dance in, get anything that will get some movement for you guys today. Thanks for tuning in to episode 59 of Tyrompers No Limit Podcast. Go have a blessed day. Thanks all.